There it is. Thank you so much for joining tonight. For all of you who don't know me, but it's really great that I'm starting to recognize all of the people on this call. My name is Erin. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the relational organizing coordinator here at the Mass Dems. I'm really, really excited about the topic tonight because, the volunteer experience is something that I have always really cared deeply about. Really recognizing that any political work, whether that's an electoral campaign or advocacy organization, cannot function without the dedication of our volunteers, is vital. The more we recognize that, appreciate that, and embrace that fact, the better off we all are. And we really thought that in order to train folks on hosting a volunteer event, we need to hear from the experience on all sides. So tonight, the training is a little different than our last two. It's going to be a panel discussion with Q&A at the end. So moderating the discussion tonight, we have the incredible Mehreen, who is, among many, many things, a Wakefield town councilor and co-chair of the Women's Outreach Subcommittee. She'll be chatting with three amazing panelists who are experts on volunteering, experts on campaign organizing, and issue advocacy organizing. I will let Mehreen introduce them in just a second. But as always, send your questions in the chat. We'll get to them at the end. And I don't want to take too much time, so I'm going to pass it right over to Mehreen, and the floor is yours.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining. When Erin asked if I would do this, I was like, I don't know, it's a nighttime event, but I love this topic. I think it's so important. Oh, you just made me the spotlight. Okay, get used to seeing myself. I think it's just so important, and something that needs to be done really well is valuing and appreciating volunteers. So I'm really excited about this panel of three fierce, amazing women who are going to tell you how to host a great volunteer event. So I'm just going to do quick bios. Feel free to chat, ask them for more information, and then we're just going to go into questions. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Erin's going to help me monitoring that. But first we have Amy. Amy is a member of the Democratic State Committee and chair of the Bourne Democratic Town Committee. She is also the town moderator of Bourne. So talk about volunteer positions, and thank you for all of that. Next, we're going to talk with Daniela, who's the organizing director for Congressman Presley's political team. Prior to joining Rep. Presley's team, she turned out the youth vote in South Florida and organized Massachusetts for Elizabeth Warren's presidential campaign. Next we have Tanya, and Tanya is the executive director of Mass Equality. Tanya ran for state rep in 2016 against a conservative incumbent, so she will talk about getting volunteers for your own campaign. And then she also served as secretary of the Sturbridge Town Democratic Committee. She's a member of, a board member of the Bay State Stonewall Dems, and she's also co-chair of the DSC's LGBTQ+ outreach subcommittee. So amazing panel, years and years of wealth and knowledge. And I'm just gonna, my first question is actually gonna be for Daniela, because one thing that Daniela said in her quote, in her bio, Daniela said she believes in organizing that is year-round and works to put power in the hands of people. And I just love that. And I think that really ties into what we're trying to build. So I'm just going to start, Daniela, using that quote and building power to the people. Can you just tell us some about when you prepare for an event? Are there do's and don'ts of logistic prep that you live by? How do you go about setting the goals for yourself and your volunteers to build that power?
That's a great question. Thank you. Hey, everybody. It's so great to be here with all of you. I think that the quote that I put in my bio and that you just mentioned, putting power in the hands of people, is something that I really try to orient myself in. With everything that I do, when I'm planning an event, when I'm building a program, when I'm going into a one-on-one with a volunteer, I'm always kind of trying to ground myself in that and figuring out how can I use this space, whatever space that is, to empower someone and create a fulfilling civic experience for someone. I come from a background of I didn't grow up volunteer on campaigns. No one ever knocked on my door. No one called my family. And so, a civic experiences is something that I had to kind of seek out proactively. And I wish that I had been pulled into these spaces earlier. And so that's kind of what I'm constantly thinking about when I'm planning an event or organizing any kind of initiative is, how can I use this space to bring in a new voice and give someone else the chance to have their moment. And so thinking through like event logistics, one of the first things that I think about is what kind of partners can I bring on to plan an event with me? I'm very much a believer in giving people responsibility and just trusting them to do the things that you're asking them to do, especially if it's someone who, maybe has never planned an event before, but has shown a lot of like excitement or enthusiasm about getting involved in this work. I try to think about, what are the responsibilities that I can delegate to this person? And even have a conversation with them and ask them, like, how do you want to be involved in this? What role do you want to play? I think it's important to not pigeonhole people into just what we need them to do, but to really be curious about what their interests are, what their strengths are, what their skills are, and then try to put them in positions where they can either build on those skills or really like flex those skills and give them a chance to shine. And I think that that's really what keeps people coming back is, they had an opportunity to do something that they were excited about. They were able to learn a new skill as a volunteer. I really believe in, organizing that isn't transactional, that isn't just like, please come to this event or give me your vote or give me a shift, but is really like, come to this event and let's figure out what skills you can take away from this, or what do you want to get out of this experience and how can I make that easier for you? And then in terms of recruiting for an event and setting goals and touching on that part of your question, I think something that I think about a lot is, obviously with campaigns and with this organizing work that we do, numbers are really important. Like we have to set goals that we need to reach because that's how we do persuasion. That's how we, turn out voters. And I know that that's all really important. But something that I try to do alongside that is to set a more qualitative goal. What do I want people to feel in this space? Who do I want to be there that maybe hasn't been part of these spaces before? What kind of leadership opportunities do I want to create? What do I want people to take away from this space? What do I want them to feel walking away from that event? And that helps me build for the event in a way that isn't so focused on the numerical goal. Like I said, it's not that goals and numbers are unimportant. It's just that they're not the full picture. They're not the only thing that we should be using to define our success. And I think that really helps me think about the quality of event that I'm building. And it means that you're thinking about the volunteer experience from the get-go, because your goal isn't just how many people showed up. It's, did they have a good time? Did they feel safe in this space? Did they feel empowered in this space? Do they want to come back and do this again? So, yeah.
Thank you. That's great. We'll get back to how do you making events where volunteers, how do they feel at the event? I think that's something that we'll talk more about. But Amy, I can't see you on my screen, but you're there somewhere. There you are. I see you. So kind of same question, like with all your hats that you wear, you do a lot of events. So what do you think about as you prepare? What are just some of the goals? And then also, how do you ensure that how do you ensure, kind of building on what Daniela said, that the volunteers are feeling comfortable, that you're meeting them where they're at? How do you ensure that those things happen?
Sure. So a lot of times when we are trying to capture new volunteers, I think it is important to give them specific and concrete goals that are achievable by them. Definitely, it's important to meet people where they are. Always, you want to go to where the person is comfortable and give them a task that's going to be easy for them to achieve, and also not overwhelm them, and kind of want to make it so that they want to participate in this organization or in this campaign or in this event, and they want to come back for more. But I think it is important to have them feel a measure of success for whatever task I gave them or training we gave them. It really does help if we can put it into practice during the time. So for sure, I always try to have a concrete goal that we want to achieve in that night. I try to be respectful of people's time and set a firm timetable for things that we're going to accomplish that evening or that day, so that everyone feels like their time was valued and that they also were able to perform the task that we needed them to do. And it does, I think, add to that sense of community and achievement to participate in that together. So for sure, everyone in today's world, especially with Zoom, can be overscheduled and overcommitted. So it's important to recognize that, I think, for some of maybe your not usual volunteers. We all have those volunteers that are kind of looking for their way in. And if you meet them where they are at their skill set, and bring them to your event and give them a task that they can do, I think that is something that I've noticed in the past has been very, very good as far as retaining volunteers and having them come back. So, sorry.
No, that's great. Great tips. I think the measure of success is really important, and respectful of time. I think that's something like, that's the number one thing, is there's just so many organizations, so many people needing your time. I think I counted at one moment, and I think, I probably get 10 to 15 campaign emails a day, and I'm gonna help the campaign that values my expertise and my time the most, and is respectful of that. So that's definitely a good point, and we will come back to the measure of success in the next question, in the next round. But Tanya, I want to talk to you because you wear many interesting hats, but you come at it from kind of an institutional organizational role of planning events, and mostly with volunteers. No one's getting paid to go to your events. So tell me a little bit about, from that side of the do's and don'ts of logistic prep, and how do you make it comfortable for volunteers to come as you prepare for an event?
Well, I think from that perspective, it's very similar in the way in which you prepare for, you handle campaign volunteers. You figure out what their strengths are and what their comfort levels are, and you try and develop a relationship with them. And that's the most important thing. This might be somebody's, the first time somebody, attends an event that you call them to volunteer for you and just table for you. That is an opportunity. It should never be considered a one and done. It's an opportunity to welcome them to your organization, to talk to them about opportunities that they may have in the future, to figure out who they are and what their motivations are. And that's the biggest thing. I think, bringing it back to the political campaigns, you always have those folks who are like, I will write 1 million postcards. And you can hand them 1 million postcards and they'll write them and they will be the best darn postcards. But it is better to hand them 1 million postcards. And then while you're handing them the postcards and the list, you say, yeah, would you mind, driving for one of our volunteers who's canvassing one day? And then once they're driving, then they hear the stories coming in from the canvases, and then they come back and they canvass. They're more willing to canvass next time. And it's the same thing with any event hosting from an organizational perspective. That is your opportunity to build lifelong members, to develop volunteers who just might not know what their skill set is, or be a little bit tentative about volunteering, but they just want to do something with their time, and really give them an opportunity to develop skill sets which will be invaluable to them and also to your organization.
I love that. I think as organizers of these events, and when we have volunteers, it's also coming up. I mentioned earlier meeting them where they're at, but it's coming up with options of how people can volunteer, right? And even when you're hosting an event, there's so many jobs that you need help with. You need somebody to run, run the Zoom, but be the timekeeper, and you need somebody to take sign in, and you need someone to take notes. And I think finding roles for people is really important, and it keeps them engaged, right? And so Tanya's going to say something to that, but I think always finding, what else they can do. And I think the best organizers are always that one step of asking for a little bit more. And Tanya, were you going to add something?
Well, I actually just wanted to respond to Alex's comment in the chat, if that's okay. I don't want to throw you too far off, Mehreen, but when we're talking about volunteers who are uncomfortable with new digital tools, I have a story from my campaign, which I really think is really applicable to that. I had a woman, she was an 85-year-old retiree. She was a ground pounder. She liked to walk every day, and she would canvas every day on her walks. And it was amazing. And the problem was she was canvassing so much, and she was doing it all on paper because she was uncomfortable even, going through NGP van and checking things off, that I could not keep up with her demand for walk lists. So what I did was I actually, I sat down with her and I said, okay, well, if I sit down with you, and I make you my point person for, drawing up map lists, and I actually show you how to do it, can we do it? And what we would do is once a week for, I want to say a month, I would go over to her house with my laptop. And the first time I was like, okay, I'm just going to cut the list here so we can work on the neighborhoods together. And the first time I was like, I'll just show you. And then the second time she was like, oh, can I try that? Oh, well, how do I exclude this? By the end of it, she was a field manager. She was cutting turfs and distributing them to other people, and she was just at the top of her game. So I think it really is, just a matter with any kind of hesitance to do anything, of personally engaging them and figuring out what that hesitancy is. When it comes to technology, oftentimes it's just they don't want to mess something up, or they've never seen it before, so they're just intimidated by it. So go at their pace, and show them before you ask that of them.
I love that. I think, I'm a big believer of kind of see one, teach one, lead one. And so if we use that model for volunteers, that was kind of the law school model. I did legal services for a bit, and it was, you watch one, you do one, and then you teach it. It was 3 times, and then you're an expert. So, but we're going to go on that technology train a little bit. Daniela, tell us a little bit about new technologies, how you get volunteers and maybe older volunteers or people not as comfortable with newer technologies. And then welcome to 2021. How do you adapt to virtual organizing? Because I think it's there's a different tool set with virtual organizing, and with Delta, we just don't know how much longer this is going to go on.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad you asked this, because I feel like this is something that I definitely struggled with in my first paid organizer role, working on Senator Warren's presidential race. Up until then, the organizing work that I had done was very local. I didn't even know it was technically organizing. I was just like, oh, I think this person should be on the school board, so I'm going to do these things to make sure that they're elected. Or I don't want this library in my near my house to be taken down, so I'm going to create petitions and stuff. And so I'd done that type of work before, but it was very based in my community at home in South Florida, and very much working with younger folks. And so when I joined Warren's team, I was the organizer for all of Eastern Massachusetts at first, and then focused in on the 4th and 5th congressional districts. And I was working with definitely older folks. And something that I had to learn is you have to break everything down as if you've never done it before, because that is how we make these spaces accessible to everybody, no matter the level of experience, the level of familiarity with the technology. And so I would practice doing volunteer trainings on my friends who had never done volunteering before. And I worked really hard to think through how to demystify the work that we do, and to not use confusing acronyms or any kind of overly campaign wordy language. Just say what you mean and communicate it in a way that is accessible. And I think it all comes down to seeing the individual value of every single person that shows up. And so, you might have a volunteer who maybe just cannot figure out the dialer, or is really frustrated with the dialer. And sometimes you just have to like make the decision to take some time and either like sit down and explain to this person how to use it, you know, one-on-one, or figure out a tool that feels more accessible to them. And I think that, you know, oftentimes in these spaces where it's like, you have to meet your goals, you have to get this done by the end of the day, we have to focus on, you know, the bigger picture. It becomes really easy to forget that the most important thing is to give, again, our volunteers a fulfilling civic experience and make sure that they're continuing to come back and that they're inspired by these spaces and this work. And so I think that if you approach it with that attitude, there's no measure of accessibility that's like too hard to reach for, you know? And I think that applies to every age group. It applies to every technology that we use on campaigns. And it has to be something that we think about. Accessibility is so big for me. When we think about, you know, planning an event, planning a space, anything, you have to think through every little detail that will allow every person possible to participate. If you're not creating that space and not being proactive about that, then inherently it's an exclusionary space. And that's not how we build a multiracial, multi-class movement that we need to achieve the things that we want to achieve. And then in terms of new technology, I would say that COVID was like really, really humbling in terms of like, you know, we learn how to do this work and then suddenly you have to toss out the playbook and relearn how to do this work, and figure out where do we meet people when that's not happening in person, where, you know, folks are living in different pockets of the internet, and we have to think about how to meet them there. Something that this past year has really taught me is that people crave community. People want to be in community, and there are ways to create that digitally. It's hard, and it's challenging, and it takes more than just like, you know, setting up a cool Google slide deck and having a training. Like, you really have to think about, how do I create a space that's welcoming? How do I connect with people? How do I make sure that the language that I use to promote my event is welcoming of people of all different, you know, experience levels and skill sets? How do I make sure that there are opportunities for people who, you know, maybe don't like a specific type of digital tool to work with another tool, to collect feedback and to be just really intentional about people's experiences. So I think digital organizing is hard. And I think it's one of the spaces where we just like really have to defer to younger people who know how to use these tools. And there's so much that we can learn from them. I think that something that is so incredible to me about the organizing that happens in Massachusetts is that young people are really at the forefront of so much of that work. And so looking to them to see how they're building and finding community in the digital world is really important. You know, campaigns and the work that we do is the landscape is changing all of the time. And so I think that it's really important to be open to learning new tactics and new tools and new ways to do this work.
I think conversely, though, it's also okay. It's also okay if people are not comfortable with the new technology. It's also okay to say, you know what, I'm going to leave the text banking to the 19-year-olds who can't get off their phones. But you know what, I am going to organize an online, you know, phone bank with some of the older volunteers who just want to use their phones and then chat with each other in like the virtual space. And, you know, and yeah, you can welcome people to either space, but they can come to whichever space they feel comfortable with. And I think that's really key too, is to meet people where they are. And, you know, just like anything else, you meet people where they are and you offer them a step up if they want to come up a step. But at the same time, if you start pulling them up that step, then they might fall down and then you're never going to see them again. So I think the goal is to just be as welcoming and inclusive, but to really just get to know your volunteers, to understand what their motivations are, because some people come to volunteer because that's their social life. Some people go to volunteer because they really care about the mission. Some people volunteer because they're looking to change careers and want to build up a new skill set. And you have to figure out which group that your volunteer falls in, or if it's another group, and really kind of cater to their needs. As much as they are helping out your organization or your campaign, there are a million different balls in the air at any given time. And just figure out which one they're best suited to catch, and what balls they are interested in catching in the future.
Yeah, I just to pile onto what Daniela and Tanya said, it's about making it as easy and comfortable for people, and being aware that, like Tanya said, for us, this is our social life. This is something most of us have done for a long time. It comes second nature to us when Tanya calls me and asks me to door knock for her, or when Daniela will call me and ask me to door knock for Ayana. I don't think twice about it. I put on my sneakers and grab my clipboard that live in my car. But in town, when we try to get newer people who I know feel the same way about me and really want to see the same change, see the same just world that we do, when I ask them to go canvassing, they flip out. We don't canvass. I don't do that. What is that? Why are you asking me to do that? And so then it becomes a conversation of if I give you 50, can you do a lit drop? Well, what do you mean? Well, can you just walk around your neighborhood and drop these things on and ring the doorbell? And if they answer, just tell them why you're supporting me or supporting, this issue, telling them to vote yes on 3 or whatever it is. And they understand that, right? The word canvassing scares them. Field kind of scares them. When you talk about a coordinator of some sort calling them, that kind of scares them. But when you're like, hey, can you drop these off and talk to your neighbors? And I'll give you your neighbors' names and addresses. And if they have a scary sign, you don't need to, you can skip that house. Then, we were able to do 2,000 pieces of lit drop for our April election we had 20 new volunteers who weren't part of the Dems, but really, believed in the candidates running. And it really was oh, when you walk your dog, can you drop this off? I mean, they literally were doing canvassing for us. And then we put all the information into, whatever data bank we have. But I think that was something too, is realizing not everyone, has the knowledge base, and some of this stuff is a little scary, right? That you want me to have conversations with strangers. So
you can also start them off with their friends too. If somebody says that they're afraid to door knock or canvas or, even lit drop, you can say, you know what though, do you have, you are at your son's soccer game on Saturday. Would you be willing to talk to the other moms and then just go into Vote Builder and knock and check off who you talk to, and look up your friends? Or would you be willing to talk to the people in your neighborhood who and then just check it off in Vote Builder so we don't bother them twice? And then at that point, when they run out of people that they know, oftentimes they're kind of hooked because they get it and they know that they're good at it. And there is, at least for me, kind of a little power trip when you actually flip somebody into a potential voter who, really wasn't concerned in the beginning. But the other thing is that figure out what bags they have in their car. At all time, everything that they have in their car, everything that they have with them is a clue to who they are. If you go into my car right now, I have a protest go bag, ready to go with, poster bag, poster board and markers and a change of clothes and water and, baby oil. I've got, I've got a spare suit and I have a clipboard and pens, because at any moment I could be, door knocking, tabling, protesting, whatever. And I need to be ready or speaking, and I need to be ready to go for whatever occasion it is. Everyone has a bag in their car. What's in their car? What's important to them? Because that tells you what kind of volunteer they can be for you and what you can do for them, more importantly.
I love, thank you, Tanya. I love how you add protesting to your list of what you're prepared for, because you are prepared for that. So thank you. Amy, 2-part question. One, how do you get your network of, again, people that maybe aren't state committee members or town committee members or town meeting members? They don't go to town meeting. How do you get them to engage? And then the second part of that question, which I think I'll ask everyone, but I feel like the new thing in organizing is to throw around transactional versus relationship. And can you talk a little bit about what that means to you and why you are a believer, I'm guessing, in relationship organizing, but how do you get your network or people you don't know to kind of volunteer?
Sure. So here on the Cape, we do a lot of regional stuff because we're a peninsula. So the towns bleed into each other as far as some of the big issues. So right now, for example, they want to put a machine gun range on our military base here in Bourne, and they're going to clear cut like 88 acres of old growth forest to do that on our county sole source water aquifer. So it's a huge deal. Every town is activated about that. And we've formed a few groups of like resistance to try to figure it out, but we really need to build a coalition. So basically what I've been doing is attending a lot of these meetings, and that's why it's good they're virtual, I guess, right now, and just trying to pull people out of those meetings to make sure that some of these people, it's very organic and they don't really have a background in organizing. So I try to let them know that I'm here to help. I share their values, and we actually have a good group of people, particularly in Falmouth. Speaking of seniors who are on the ground, it's like amazing. So I try to let them know that the people are here and we're ready to work, and we show up for things, is what I try to let them know, that we're going to stand behind you and with you on this issue that we all care about. And down the road, there's going to be more opportunities for these social and community connections to fight for other things that we believe in. And oh, hey, my state senator is also against this machine gun range, so you should come support her with me, is what I always do that. So, I mean, relational organizing is the most important because you connect with the person on a level that is really important, especially in the pandemic. I'm an elder lawyer by day, so lots of my clients are isolated and lonely. And if we're having a long talk or they're just calling me at work to talk about stuff, I might go look in Vote Builder and see how they're voting, because I know that I could call them later and say, hey, there's a great organizing event on Zoom. I know you can Zoom. We just Zoomed together. Why don't you join us and see if any of these people are here that are people you can connect with, or if you are feeling passion to join us in our fight for whatever we're going on about. So yeah, the relational organizing is really where you form that connection and show people how invested you are, not just in our community and everything, but in them too as a person. Like, I'm hearing you, and your values are my shared values. And if that's important to you, I'm going to show up for you. And then I hope down the road, you're going to show up for me when I call and ask you. So that's really how I try to build it. And yeah. I just did want to say something about the seniors with technology. We have had good success. Falmouth was all paper through the 2018 midterms, but we had 40 volunteers. So we're going to do what they want to do because they want paper. So that's part of what I mean about meeting people where they are. I know we are going to be digital this next round, and they did adapt great during the pandemic, but sometimes it takes a little longer. But if they're getting the results, you can let people be technologically where they need to be. Yeah, it's challenging to enter the data after the fact, but that's the cost of having these awesome volunteers sometimes. So sorry.
No, I love that. And I think that goes back to like the goals is knocking on the doors and getting that done, right? And then you figure out a way to like get the data, the quantitative, which is,
it's important, but it's not as important as like me knowing that my 78-year-old friend was able to knock on or call or do whatever she wanted to do. She did those things. She was out of the house, or she was socially engaged, and that meant something to her that day. And when I call her again to do something else that's different, I know she's more likely to say yes to me because I supported her through whatever challenge that just happened.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that you'll be able to call her in 2022 and ask her to do something more important than she didn't use Vote Builder, right? Or Van or whatever.
Exactly. I don't care.
Yeah.
I'll enter your data if you're going to make those calls.
I love that. That is great. So Daniela, just because I love this question, and I'm just going to go is how how do you get your personal network engaged to volunteer? And then also for you, because you kind of, you do this for a living, how do you get new diverse voices into the fold?
Yeah, I feel like that's something that I'm constantly thinking about and being super intentional about is how are we like proactive about bringing new voices into the space? The organizing work that I've done here in Massachusetts has shown me that there are like so many people in the state who care so deeply about the values that we're fighting for and about doing this work. And that's so incredible. But there are also a lot of pockets of communities here that haven't been, part of the conversation and haven't been a part of these spaces for whatever reason. Maybe they haven't asked to be, they haven't been asked, or they haven't felt comfortable in the, in the moments where they have, stepped into our spaces. And so I think that there's so much there that we can do to make our spaces more welcoming and more inclusive, and to bring in new voices, which we need if we want to, again, build effective movements that inform effective policy. And so I think, something that I think about a lot is how can I use an event to give someone a new leadership role, like have someone who hasn't been engaged before, give them a new leadership role and give them some responsibility. And maybe that's a window into a new community or a new group of folks, a new, group of people that we haven't tapped into because we haven't asked them to engage with us yet. And so that's something that I think about a lot is, I'm going to reach out to this person who I saw, is doing cool work on Twitter. And I'm going to ask her who she thinks hasn't been given a platform or is excited about this work, but maybe hasn't had a chance to be part of these spaces. And I'm going to reach out to that person. I'm going to say, hey, I want you to take on this event. I want you to help me build this out. I want to know what you're interested in. What skills are you excited to explore? What do you want to build on? And how can we have you build that as part of this event or as part of this, program or whatever it is. And that is so powerful, giving someone the chance to take on a new challenge and showing them that you really trust them and that you want them to be a part of that space. You're automatically making that a more welcoming space. I'm specifically thinking about an event that we had last week. We had a youth organizing conversation here in JP, and we had about like 25 young folks join the conversation. Some of these kids can't even vote yet. They're like 14 and 15, but they are doing the most unbelievable work in their communities. They're starting organizations, to distribute food resources in their neighborhood, or they're organizing around losses and struggles that their community has faced in this past year. And so tapping into that is so important. Trusting them to lead is so important. And I think that that's how we create more diverse spaces, is trusting people and bringing them into this work, asking them to get involved, and meeting them where they are. Maybe that's a leadership role, maybe that's just asking them to show up and see if this is a space that they feel comfortable in. But I think that it starts with sometimes stepping aside and letting other people lead and giving them a chance to speak for themselves. I like to think that, we often talk about like people who are voiceless or communities who are voiceless. They're not voiceless. We can just pass the mic and let them speak for themselves. And I think that that's how we create more diverse organizing spaces that people are energized and excited to be a part of. And so what kind of leadership that is already there in the spaces that we want to activate, in the communities that we want to activate, what kind of leadership can we elevate and tap into? So that's my thought on that.
I love that. We have a lot of young people that are engaged in Wakefield and the surrounding towns, and just giving them that opportunity. And I'm shameless that I the interns, or not the interns, the volunteers who really help, like I write college recommendations for them and they, because I know them, I work with them, and they really appreciate it. And I get to write about their skills, that they led the whole field, or they wrote a comms article, or all of this stuff. And so, I don't, it's not like a quid pro quo, but I get to know them at the end of it. And I'm like, hey, if you need another recommendation, I'm happy to help out. And so I've had 2 kids go on to great universities and working on the third one this year. So it is fun. I have 2 more questions, and then I see people put your questions in the chat, and we'll do a little like fast round of kind of the questions that people still have outstanding, but getting through the questions we had picked. And the next one is for Tanya. So we talked a little bit about virtual organizing, and I feel like you are on a virtual thing almost every day. And we're on a lot of the same calls. So can you tell, like, how did you adapt, and some best practices about virtual organizing, in particular, of how do you keep volunteers engaged when it's been 18 months of this? Because I think, and then if you have any thoughts on hybrid organizing going in the future, and I don't know if any of your groups are thinking about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of things that I do to, keep volunteers engaged is gamifying. I have a lot of contests for my volunteers and my interns. I have a lot of competitions. I pit them against each other where appropriate, for everything from, from a fundraising to graphics to, whatever it is that we need to, who can make the most phone calls in an hour. And, and that helps too. And part of the gamifying is the prizes. And I don't want to overlook the importance of that, because, when you're in person, and you go to an event, oftentimes you get a t-shirt, you get a hat, you get a koozie, you get some piece of trash that's going to go in the bottom of your drawer. And I can't speak for all of you, but I will do just about anything for a free t-shirt that I will probably never wear again, and it will be uncomfortable and ugly, but I will do anything for a t-shirt. It's important to remember that your virtual volunteers are doing just as much, if not more work. So send them the t-shirt, like remember to acknowledge them. And remember that even if you're in virtual spaces, when you get off the call, make a point to contact them individually. Maybe not all of them if you have an event with 30 volunteers, but at least right after the event, call 4 or 5 of them and just say, thank you so much for showing up. It really meant a lot that you were there. It really meant a lot that you gave your time to this. It really meant a lot that you got this goal accomplished. And make sure that you acknowledge them. And, and it's also things like, just send them little things. And I will say, I'm actually a pretty terrible thank you note person. It's embarrassing to admit. Mehreen is the queen of that. Mehreen is amazing at that. And it really does make a difference, because Mehreen knows, like, if she asks me to do something, I do it. I don't even ask her what it is. I'm just like, okay, yes, because I know that appreciation is there. And we need to remember that in these virtual spaces. I will also say, and I highly recommend to any of you, there is a way of turning off your own image at the top of a Zoom screen. And I highly encourage you to teach your volunteers how to turn that off, because it really helps to combat Zoom fatigue when you aren't looking at your own face. That oftentimes is really distracting for volunteers, and it takes you out of the moment of feeling that you're in community when you're looking at yourself, because it's a reminder that it's a virtual environment, where if you're just looking at a room full of friends, it's different. And that's something that I do encourage my volunteers to do. And I also encourage them to keep their cameras on and keep the chat window wide open so they can have direct chats with each other throughout.
Thank you. Yes, I'm a big believer in thank you notes, and just thinking, like, overthinking people. And so if it's a social media post where you tag them, if they're okay with that, sending little keychains. T-shirts are great. I have yet to find the budget for t-shirts, but I will order things off of Etsy all the time. I think it makes a big difference just to show appreciation. And you are appreciative of that. So this is final question for all three of you. And I'll go Amy, Daniela, and then Tanya, just a little bit about general success stories and best practices. One thing that stands out as you planned an event, it doesn't need to only be in the virtual world, but really tell us a feel-good story, and it'll be hard to top your story of 78-year-old volunteers in Falmouth, but find another one, Amy.
I'll try. I mean, I'm just really proud of how adaptable the volunteers ended up being when we entered the COVID space, having to go virtual. Them accepting that it was either a hub dialer or texting, and that I wasn't going to be able to be in the room with them to urge them on, keep going. Yeah, it's just been something that has been very inspiring to see that if you meet people where they are and you empower them and give them the skills they need to achieve the task, and having them come back and multiple times over a campaign is really rewarding. And that happened for me last spring, a year ago spring now, when we were working on special elections. It was just really, it inspired me to keep going, like over the summer and everything. So to know that we could still win elections even if we couldn't be together was something. And yeah, I'm looking forward to being in person. It's really difficult now when I have my DTC, just all they want to do is have an in-person meeting, but I'm not super comfortable with that. So trying to just keep your spirits up. And it really is about, for us, it's been about organizing around these local issues during these downtimes when we don't have an active election. So sorry, I don't have a specific story. I could tell you about my Falmouth volunteers. I will tell you that for a select board race to elect the first woman of color to the Falmouth select board, they raised $10,000 and had 40 people on the phones like 5 nights, like every night for like 4 weeks. It was amazing. So anyone can come down to Falmouth and they'll put you to work.
That's a great. I want those volunteers. I will come
They're
down
amazing.
to get those volunteers.
I was like, how much did you raise? And they said, don't tell anyone, but $10,000 in 2 days. And I was like, oh, it's like freaking out. So yeah, they're good.
Daniela, how about you?
Yeah, I would say the most important thing is just like accessibility. I think that it applies to everything that we've talked about here today. Like, how do we create more inclusive spaces? How do we bring in diversity? So much of that begins with like, how accessible are you making your event? Are you providing food? Is it tea accessible? Are you providing childcare for parents who like, can't get childcare and want to be able to bring their kids to the event? Are you, making sure that everyone feels safe in that space? I think that for me is the most important. And all the times that, we've gone out of our way to do that, I know how appreciated it is by the people who wouldn't have been able to participate without us thinking through those things. The specific instance that I'm thinking of is on the Warren campaign. We did this 2 times because it was so great. Canvassing with kids. So we invited parents to bring their kids and their families to come canvass together. We were asking folks to, on that campaign, we were asking folks to drive to New Hampshire to knock on doors. And so it's a really huge ask to make of people. You're essentially asking them to give up their entire day because between the drive there and the door knocking and the stopping to get lunch and then the driving back, it's a lot to ask of people. And we did a canvassing with kids program. We developed a specific training to help parents who were bringing their kids along. The training was led by one of our volunteers who's a teacher and was so excited to take this on, and ended up becoming a staging location captain because this experience gave her a chance to take on a leadership role, and she did it and loved it. And the kids loved it. They had a great time. We had coloring sheets available for them when they showed up there. They had pins, they took pictures. We had a whole like inspiration wall where they wrote about the things that are important to them. So you had like 9 and 10-year-old little kids drawing pictures of the planet and saying how they were so excited to tell people about how much they care about climate justice and climate change, and that's why they were out on the doors. And so I think that when you know, it takes a little bit of extra effort and planning and intention, but when you go out of your way to make spaces more accessible to people, it means so much to them, and it becomes a more fulfilling experience for all of us. So that's I think the most, or among the most important of things that I think about.
I love that example from seniors in Falmouth to young people up in New Hampshire, children in New Hampshire. That's great. I just want to say one thing before I let Tanya go. And I am watching the clock, Erin, but I wear my Pakistani auntie hat a lot, where like having meetings without food seems really weird to me. So when our Dems used to meet, or if I had a volunteer from my own campaign, there was just always food. It's just who I am. I feed people. That's how I show my love and appreciation. Sometimes food is my love language, although policy is my real love language. But, you know, it's weird having meetings where you can't have pizza and you can't. I used to bring baked cupcakes for every single Wakefield Down committee that we had, and virtual for a year. I can't bake cupcakes, but I had volunteers write postcards to states like swing states last year. I think I coordinated like 5,000 postcards, and it was mostly volunteers in Wakefield. And I ended up baking all these cookies and leaving them outside my front door, and told people to pick them up. And I had 100 cookies gone in an hour of those volunteers that they drove. They were like Massachusetts shaped or donkey shaped. I do like, you know, frosted cookies. And it was my way of saying thank you, but it was so appreciative that literally in an hour, they were like all gone, and people were like, can we take more than one? And I was like, fine. But it also was just, you know, for me, that was a quick thank you. And also how I build community, right? People mentioned it like, after, you're going to bake your cookies again? I'm like, yeah, next time we do postcards. So Tanya, one memorable, happy success story that you want to share.
Well, actually, it's actually along the cookie lines. So my next door neighbor is actually a cookie baker. So I had asked her to do some custom cookies for me in the shape of the Massachusetts flag, and also just saying vote and things like that. And we were having a hard time getting volunteers to come to canvases during one campaign that I was working on. And the problem was, I live in a rural area. So when you're talking about organized canvases, nobody wants to kick off from one central area and then go out for 4 hours, at the end of which you might have hit 20 doors, just because of the way things are spaced out. So what I decided to do was actually, I had a canvas, and the canvas lasted a week. And I just said, come up anytime on Sunday, pick up your pack, and I will include like a couple of these custom cookies. And, you know, all that we ask is you hit, you know, these 60 doors this week, you know, enter them in by the end of the week. And then, you know, we'll have a celebration at the end. And that's what we ended up doing. That ended up really helping with our canvassing efforts, because instead of doing those organized, okay, we need you for 4 hours on Sunday, which makes it less accessible for that working mom who might have 5 to 7 p.m. on Wednesday, and that is it. You know, or she might be able to do an hour every night, but she certainly can't take, you know, 5 hours when you can include the drive on Sundays. So what we started doing is we would just do these canvas packs with cookies, and they would come pick up their cookies, and we got to know them well enough that we knew, you know, who was going to be canvassing with their kids to make sure that we had enough extra for the kids and, you know, whoever else in their family. And then they would come the next weekend, and the next weekend we would have a little celebration where we would have food set out. And I'm Indian, and I live in a rural community, so there's not a lot of Indian food. So I would actually cook an Indian lunch for them, and then, you know, they would pick up the next week's canvas packets, and then we'd repeat. And that was just something that I found to be really effective in making it personal and giving the volunteers the opportunity to kind of come together, even when they weren't doing the traditional 4 hours in a block together.
That's great. Cookies, sugar is always a great thing. So I'm mindful of time. I have 1 minute left. So Joshua's question, I think we went to a lot of the other questions, but Joshua, my question is about trust. What is one to do when they find the volunteer has been a mole or informant to the opposing campaign or party?
I had one.
Brutal.
Go ahead, Tanya, all you.
I had one, and basically I found out he was slipping information, so I just stopped giving him information. But I actually got even the expression "keep your friends close and your enemies closer." I kept having him volunteer. It's just his what he had access to became restricted, and sometimes I fed him false information because I don't like if he like. This particular person wasn't saying anything bad about me on the doors. He just had a big mouth and would run his mouth to my opponent. So what I found was, I can still put him on doors. I just can't tell him what our actual numbers look like. And I made him feel like and eventually I made him feel like I valued him more than my opponent valued me, and he stopped slipping information. But I just kind of kept a close eye on him and, used him for what I could while, watching him a little closer. And I don't know if that's the best idea, but at the same time, it's also something where this person was known to some of my other volunteers, and I didn't want to alienate them by calling him out. So.
Thank you. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Yes. Erin, I'm going to kick it back off to you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to remove everyone's spotlights and get you all out of the hot seat real quick. Okay, perfect. That should be back to normal. Well, I am just so grateful, not only to the people on this call, but of course, 1,000 thank yous to our panelists and our moderator tonight. You have all left me feeling just so much more energized and inspired, and I'm just so grateful to be in a virtual room with you all. I saw a lot of folks in the chat talking about wanting to engage with their community, and the good news is that this program is much more than these incredible training sessions that we do host every month. So if you're wondering how the state party specifically can help you connect with your community and other Democrats in your area, please reach out. You can email me directly at Erin, ERIN, at massdems.org, or visit us at massdems.org/blueprint. We'll talk about how we're supporting incredible organizers and volunteers all across the Commonwealth and really build communities in a transformational but not transactional way, which might have been one of my favorite things that came out of tonight. So I'll be sending a follow-up email to you all with details on how to join our team, along with a recording of this training to share with folks that might not have made it. And I will let everyone go. Historically, we end right on time, which is really exciting, and we'll try and keep that going for the future trainings, because hopefully people keep showing up for that reason. Thank you all. I'll end it with that. And again, reach out, email me. Let's keep these conversations going. Thank you.